Good morning. It's great to see people joining us again for our series. And for those of you who are new, welcome to the Take Your Job Search to the X Level series presented by General Electric Credit Union and the Xavier Leadership Center. Both organizations share a mission to serve families, individuals, and community across the greater Cincinnati region. We're excited to do that through this 8-session series to help you learn what works and what doesn't directly from professional career coaches, human resource executives, and hiring managers who work with some of the area's largest employers. For today's session, we ask that you use the chat feature for the requested exercise feedback, questions, and comments. We'll monitor chat and share the thoughts and ideas and reflections. We also will have time at the end of the session for questions and answers, but feel free to put your questions in during the series and we'll get to those either at the end or we'll hop in and answer those. Today's session, Telling Your Story, Resume and Social Media, is led by our partner, Brent Lobig. Brent is a career transition coach who helps prepare individuals for the next job opportunity which best matches their skills. His approach involves one-on-one assistance for the job seeker in assessing their skills, presenting their story, and researching the market for challenging new roles. Prior to his current role, Brent was a partner with an executive search firm and spent 27 years with Deloitte & Touche. Brent, thanks for being with us today and sharing your wisdom and experience.
Great, thanks very much, Carol. I'm certainly very glad to be here. And certainly welcome to all of you. I wish we were in a position where we could see each other, but certainly this format I think will allow us to deliver some great ideas for you and certainly hope that it furthers you along your path, no matter where you are. I think we probably have a variety of different situations represented here, maybe some people that are in a current job transition, maybe some others that have just started to look around because someone that they were sitting next to is no longer there. Maybe they see some changes at their organization. So, you know, it's certainly wise to keep one hand on the resume at all times because you don't know what's coming down the pike. And what we hope to do today is to give you some ideas on how you might bolster your resume, think about your LinkedIn profile, and really spend some time on your story. I think the aspects of what a person can say about themselves and what they are interested in doing is a very powerful technique in connecting with people from a networking standpoint. We'll talk more about you know, the avenues that you might take to find a new position when it's right for you to do so. So today the key things that you'll get out of this is, one, we're going to spend time on specifics around how you might improve your resume, how you might think about your LinkedIn profile, and then again how you tell your story. So with that, just wanted to run through how these items are connected. If you think about maybe the prior employment market where you might send a resume in, you might get a call back, you might be able to discuss your resume with someone. Obviously, particularly in today's world, and even before COVID, there's an awful lot of change that has happened within the recruiting processes, both from a company standpoint, the search firms. There's an awful lot of electronic communications, and it's difficult to get connected to a person. I think we've always heard a lot of complaints about candidates saying, "I just wish I could talk to a person." So it's even more important today that you have a very descriptive resume, a very strong LinkedIn profile, and then when you do get that audience, the ability to tell your story. And I think the background behind that, again, I'm going to give you some ideas on those those components, because they're very important as far as how you match up with um, positions that you're most interested in, as opposed to maybe a position that is just, I'm going to take the next one off the line. So, in choosing your career path, just a couple of comments there. Um, I, I would encourage you to think about, and this is drawing on some of my experience as both a hiring manager when I was at Deloitte, as well as when I was doing recruiting for Gilman Partners there in Cincinnati. And I think having people understand what path they want to go down, it sounds very simple, but I will tell you that not everyone has thought well enough through as far as the type of path they want. And it's not just my next position somewhere else, but it's also your current path and how you compare the opportunities you have with your own organization. And I think the challenge that I would pose to you is be very open, because the path that you choose might not be one that you expect. Just to not bore you with too many details, but to give you a little bit of insight into my career. I came out of school with a accounting degree. Um, I had some systems background that I took while in college. I was identified by my first prospective employer, and that was Marathon Oil. And they said, "Oh, we see you have this systems background. Would you like to, consider that in combination with the accounting?" And that led me down a path that was a combination of those two areas, which dating myself back in the 80s, that was a new ground, and certainly some opportunity to distinguish myself. And then I moved to Deloitte and worked there in a capacity of combining both accounting and systems. And then after 27 years at Deloitte, when I retired from Deloitte, I went into recruiting. And so my resume wouldn't have said, boy, here's the perfect person to do recruiting, if you looked at the types of things I had done. But what I had done in my past was I had some leadership opportunities, and in those I had responsibilities for um, both developing people, mentoring people, as well as all the other kind of routine compensation and evaluations and whatnot. But I enjoyed that HR component, and that led me down the path of the recruiting angle. And then I have since started focusing in on career transition coaching. And again, a little bit of an extension of those things. But I would tell you that a few years ago, when I graduated college, I certainly never dreamed that I would be doing something around more people and HR activities, because it was something that I was focused on being an accountant or an auditor or whatnot. And so I've gone down a path that I wouldn't have laid out, but I would encourage you to think about the things that are most important to you. And we'll talk about, again, how you say that in a resume and whatnot. So as a component of all this process, um, the General Electric Credit Union and Xavier Leadership Center series is really an excellent way to have you be challenged, have you learn some new things, think about things in a different way, keep Carol busy, certainly have an opportunity to be exposed. This is session 3 out of 8, right, Carol?
Yes,
Um,
correct.
and the last two, the previous two, getting in the job search mindset and your personal brand, were both excellent sessions. I viewed those before this session, and I think you would get a lot out of those and the ones to follow. So a little bit of a advertisement there, but I think it plays into what we're hoping to do through this whole series, and that's to give you better preparation for the job market, give you some better skills, and hope that you're prepared when it's time to seek that next position. So one of the things we'd like to do right off the bat here, and so I can read the screen, I'm going to need to use some glasses. Um, Use your chat box there, and would you select one or two industries that you might be seeking a position in? We have a wide array here. I couldn't put all of them on there. By virtue of definitions of industries, I think we could probably fill 30 or 40 of them, depending on the types of areas that people want to focus. But please just note in the chat which industries you're seeking, and that'll give us a little bit better background on who's on the call and some of the things you're looking for.
Yeah, so a lot of education, not in nonprofit, several healthcare, the services industry, professional services, consumer products, a couple, at least 4 CPG, lots of nonprofit and education, marketing and communication, social media, human resources, software development, consumer, another CPG, financial industry, government, consulting work, such as Deloitte, or a lot of education, nonprofit, let's see, professional services, great. So financial industry. So probably about 4 or 5 of those really are coming through.
Yeah, yeah, great.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
it sounds like there may be more nonprofit than maybe I was expecting. So just thinking about the variety of different types of industries and what that means for you, what I'm going to suggest you do as far as thinking about your resume and your story and whatnot, make sure that the type of experiences that you can comment on, the types of things that you've done, fit the role that you're seeking. So we'll talk about that more in a minute, but you want to gear your story. For instance, if you're an accounting person in a nonprofit, but you actually want to be an accounting person in, let's say, manufacturing or consumer products, or vice versa, just be thinking about the types of experiences that might be relevant for that industry. And it's very important for you to use that as a very focused activity. And the reason I say that, again, drawing on some of my Gilman Partners recruiting background, I can't tell you how many resumes that we would see with a rather generic description of what someone has done. And while that is factually accurate, it doesn't have the focus and the suggestion that someone might pick up and say, oh, I think that person would be great doing this type of role. So just make sure that the description that you have does focus in on the types of things that that you've done that fit with the industry and then ultimately the role that you're seeking. So this gets into telling your story. And I think if we took a poll on, we're not going to, but if we took a poll for the people on the call, I would say in baseball terminology, some of you are probably still on first base as far as how you're telling your story, and others of you might be much more advanced and rounding third. The importance behind this is I would suggest you be very clear on who you are. I do get into conversations with people that say, boy, I'm not sure what I want, and I'm not sure, that what I've done will prepare me. Well, this is the time for you to be very specific on developing a story that draws on the experiences that you have, whether you're in nonprofit or education or manufacturing or financial services, professional services, whatever it might be. You have experiences and you have accomplishments there that can be used as examples to target the role that you want. So in your resume, we'll talk about this more in a couple slides, but in your resume, you want to think about the accomplishments that you have achieved in your current role or a previous role. So if your position was to purchase materials, you want to describe, I have developed a program. I participated in a program that saved the organization, $200,000 or $1 million on an annual basis. Whatever accomplishments that you might have, on nonprofit, it might be something around the satisfaction of the people that you have interacted with, the people that rely on your nonprofit services. So, in looking at the way that that you describe yourself, be thinking about what that story represents. So, we talk frequently about the elevator speech. What this story is kind of the elevator speech multiplied by 3. So it's not a hour long. It's not going to take you. If I walked up to Carol right now and told her what I did, as she eloquently described at the beginning, it's a summary of what my career's been, but it also has an important focus on what I want to do. If I wanted to right now go back into accounting, I would write a summary and tell my story that says, yep, I've recently been working in some recruiting roles, but I really love accounting, and I spent 27 years doing this at Deloitte, and I spent additional time in accounting in Marathon Oil, and so I would focus in on those areas to target the role that that I really want. So conversely, the comment about watch for the open door, you might not know, and this is something that you will identify through additional research, which I'm going to ask when we end this, that you do some homework about the types of things that you want to do and companies or organizations that you want to work for. But you may be qualified to do some things that you haven't really thought about. So it's not that any one of us, most likely anyway, on this call is going to be a rocket scientist. If there's some people from GE, you might actually be a rocket scientist, but most of us would not have that. And so I'm not talking about going from a marketing person or a trade specialist or a teacher and going into an astronaut program. I'm talking about where you have, let's say, financial skills that are well developed, and there's an opportunity for you to move into a different industry or a different type of role that has complementary type skills required. So one thing that you might do in trying to figure this out is to test it out on others in the same field. So you're going to find that maybe friends of yours or business connections, even recruiters, you can have some conversation with them about the types of things that you're thinking about doing. And I think from a focus standpoint, you just never know where it might lead. So I don't want to confuse you, and I don't want to leave you with the thinking that you're going to get off this call and say, well, you know what, I always wanted to be an engineer, but you don't have an engineering background. Well, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about things that might be related. It might be something that you are passionate about. In my case, I am very passionate about people. And that is something that I realized in my roles at Deloitte, and yet, Deloitte is more known, not completely, but more known in the consulting and accounting tax world as an organization that's providing professional services. But I did enjoy the interactions and the topics that I had that I deal with for the people. And so it just led me down a different path. So I encourage you to think about that as you look at your own career path. So what does this mean on the resume? So the resume is a great starting point. LinkedIn is the kind of electronic version of of your story and what you want to get across as far as your experience. But the resume is still a document that nearly every company that we were working with from a recruiting standpoint wanted a resume. And it was fine. The LinkedIn profile might be out there, but they still wanted a resume. I don't know whether that's because they want to print it off and write on it or what, but there's still an attachment to a resume. A resume is a document that there's really not one answer for what a resume should look like, but I'm going to give you some ideas on things that hopefully can fine tune what you have and what you're presenting. So if we ask 10 people, I think 9 of them might have a slightly different format for the resumes. But from an overall standpoint, one of the most important things that I want to discuss today is that summary statement. And if we pull up each one of your resumes, some of you may have a statement, some of you may not. Some of you may have put a lot of thought into it, others may not have yet. But that summary statement really sets the tone for who you are. It has a descriptor of the key things that you're capable of doing, but it also should have the key things that you want to do. So you can kind of lead the witness, in the way that you write these. And I would use that as a great opportunity for you to direct the reader of that resume to match up to a position that you would find most rewarding. So as you describe your roles and what you've done in the resume, think about the English language and the plain text that you can use to describe these. Now, I want to be careful in saying that because frankly, if I think Carol said they were a software developer. If you're a software developer, you're going to have different language and it's going to be of a much more technical nature than maybe someone that's coming out of, a financial role or a nonprofit or education or whatnot. So match it to the reader and match it to the role and description that you think is going to target the type of job that you're looking for. So what I have seen in the past is people get a little bit bogged down in using the descriptions and the titles. And we'll talk about this in a second, but they get bogged down in the titles that the company uses. In other words, if you are a marketing manager, one company might call that creative designer for the monthly whatever, blah blah blah. Well, that's going to confuse the reader of that resume. So if you have to, I'm not telling you to make up descriptions or definitions of your role, but if you have to, put the name that the company uses, if that's a proper name, and then put in parentheses, it's a marketing manager, or make sure that that's contained in the description of what you say about each one of the roles. And I can't tell you how important that is, because back to the scenario of how long do people in recruiting positions spend on a resume, it really is a very short time. I hate to confirm that that myth, but it is very clear when you are reading a resume where a person can carefully describe what they've done, it's very clear on the types of activities for a person that's written that very well. When you have a lot of jargon, you have a very verbose description or something that is not really on the mark for describing that particular role. It's distracting, and it's very easy to go on to the next item and maybe on to the next resume. So just a word words of wisdom there related to how you write those. The supplemental categories, I get a lot of questions on these, on what should I put, if you have a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree, or maybe you are working in trades and you have certifications. So all of those are important as far as describing those. It's important. I sometimes see, particularly you technical people, I sometimes see a long list of software packages or certifications or training classes that people have been to. You want to be careful not making that a page by itself. Put down the ones that are most important, again, the most relevant for the position that you're looking for. But we probably don't need to see every training class that you've been to there. Community activities and charity work, a little bit the same. Again, if you're in nonprofit, those are extremely important references as far as things that you've done and what you are bringing to that nonprofit organization. But for those of you who are not in a nonprofit role, those are important activities. I like to see a brief mention of those on a resume. It does give a more well-rounded view for what the person is active in. And frankly, you can read down a resume and, you've done job number 1, job number 2, job number 3, and those are well described. And then it gets down to, I cycled in the Tour de France. I mean, yeah, I absolutely will tell you that a recruiter will see that and say, wow, tell me about that Tour de France experience. I mean, those are the types of life experiences that certainly are very important, can engage in a lot of conversation, can show a tremendous amount of commitment and focus on, making the world a better place or pursuing activities that you are passionate about.
Well, and Brent, that kind of goes back to the purple cow, right? And what makes you stand out.
Absolutely.
And not being false with that or too over the top, but that is something about you that probably does stand out if it's something significant.
Yes, and Carol, that's a good reminder because I blew right past the purple cow.
You're fine.
My box is hiding that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
If for those of you who wondered what the purple cow was, that means you probably didn't hear the last webinar. So just to spend 1 second on that, all of the things that I've been talking about as far as telling your story and the types of things you can do with your resume are really to make you stand out. And when you listen to the webinar that was just on last on your personal brand, you will you will understand the concept of the purple cow being, in a field full of cows, how do you stand out from the herd? So
right.
A purple cow certainly would be someone that you want to think about in your own, whether it's descriptions or your story, all of those things. And that concept is something that I would certainly encourage you to think about as you create your story and work that. So Carol, thanks for the reminder.
Sure. And Brent, just to build on that, we did have a question, a great question about on the resume, putting your strengths or those Gallup polls or your DISC assessment. So do you put those assessment results somewhere on that resume?
Yeah, I would certainly use some of your strengths, and we're going to get to the summary statement here. I would use some of that detail in the summary statement or within some of the descriptions. I wouldn't necessarily put results of an assessment as a separate box on there. It's
Perfect.
you know, it's a little bit precious space, you know, on a resume. I think the you know, the focus, and I will mention again, you know, there's not really one answer on what a resume looks like. There are some that I've seen that are still one page. Most are probably two. If you got a lot to say or a number of positions, you know, they're going into 3 pages. I've seen resumes that are 7, 8, 9, 10 pages, and I would tell you that's probably too long. So I would look at the content, whether it's those assessments or the types of things you want to get across, references being another one of those. I would not include too much detail there. Um, the the beautiful line, references available on request, or even, you know, some of the assessment results available. Glad to discuss something like that is fine, but I wouldn't put the specific results of those. But I certainly would put your strengths within the statement.
Great.
So, um, on to this statement. We're just going to take a few minutes here, and want to check on time. I think we're good so far. But take 3 minutes. Some of you may have a very strong summary statement. Others may not even know what I'm talking about. So this is the box at the top, typically at the top of your resume, that basically says, this is both who I am and also kind of directs towards what I'm looking for. So I'm going to give you a couple examples here as soon as I flip the, well, I'll flip it, but I'm going to flip it back. So here's a couple samples we'll look at while you're writing, but I want you to take 3 minutes and start with listing your key strengths and attributes, again, that are attractive to an employer that you want to work for, whether that's a nonprofit, whether it's a manufacturer, whoever, and you're using this summary to tell your story. So I'll stop talking for a second, and Carol's going to play some music, and we'll give you 3 minutes to work on that. And I'm going to bring up the slide here for the examples to give you some ideas.
Perfect.
Good. Thanks, Carol. So I don't expect that each of you is going to have a complete summary that's as developed as either one of these, but use these as examples for what I hope you would take the start that you got today and build that or refine what you have, and make sure that you are focusing your description into the area that you want to be in. So be thinking about, again, it's a little bit of self-promotion, a little bit of advertising, but it's relying on the things that you've done, the things that you're good at, back to the strengths, make sure that those are included in here. Got a lot of license. I would not go any longer than the 2 that are on here. I've seen ones that are, just a sentence, but I think a couple sentences or phrases are probably enough, depending on, again, how technical or how involved your next position is that you're trying to match up to. So
Right.
use that as a starting point, the exercise we just did, but continue to work on that after we get done today.
And Brent, I would add too, this is not a time to be shy or humble. And so I think sometimes, the rest of the resume, it's all detail, right? It's all facts, the things you've done. But I think in this part specifically, maybe having somebody that knows you well to say, help me talk about what you see in me. So maybe it's a former boss or a colleague or a mentor, because sometimes people can describe us in better ways than we might be able to do if we're just trying to write this. So that is another way to really try to build your story and stand out, where maybe you don't have the words, but others can kind of help with that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Definitely don't be bashful.
Yeah.
Don't say you developed the rocket ship if you really didn't, but certainly make sure that your strengths are coming out in this. And I would say it is a great opportunity for you to direct someone that's going to be reading your resume. Yeah, no, thanks for making that point. So just as far as your resume and organizing your content, and part of this is also geared towards the LinkedIn profile too. But we talked about using clear job titles and how important that is. I would just want to emphasize again, make the document as readable and usable as possible. But when you talk about what you've done and the measurable results that you have accomplished, that is so powerful as far as showing that prospective employer what you're capable of doing. And I think the numerical, the types of results that you can describe, are ones that it's going to be something that you need to scatter throughout the document. Don't worry about having measurable results for every line, but that's going to look a little bit strange. But certainly think about that as you build your content. You've heard a lot, I think, about keywords and how, in today's artificial intelligence and the scanning that goes on of resumes, and even just from a set of eyes and a recruiter, whether it's with an organization or with a search firm, but keywords really stand out as far as what you're capable of. I would litter some of those keywords in your summary statement, and then certainly make sure that they occur in your resume. We talked a little bit about the length of the resume. I think where I would suggest you fall is do what's appropriate for you to tell your story. Technical people tend to have longer resumes and talk about some of the specific software projects they've worked on and whatnot. I would say some of that may be important and may drive some additional, it's likely important, but may drive some additional content that you need to put in. But I would not go crazy with length for the vast majority of you. So it's you're not going to be evaluated on the volume of what you have down. And just one final point, people ask me about having multiple versions of resumes. The standard recommendation on that is don't do it. And the reason for that is it's too hard to keep track of where those resumes are going and what type of person is reading your financial analyst resume versus your investment advisor resume. And you may be qualified to do a little bit of both, but what I would suggest is you just be careful in writing the summary and writing the descriptions that people in both areas can pick up on what you're capable of doing. So just another quick exercise. We'll just spend a couple minutes on this, and I think Carol's got some more music to play. Just think about, and this is an exercise that we want to start today, but I want you to think about this going forward. Think about the roles that you're seeking, and then put those on the left-hand side of the page, where that's 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatnot, and then put the strengths down on the right side of the page. And it's certainly a great opportunity for you to compare what's required, how you might tell your story, the things, if you have gaps in what you might be needing as far as at least some education or some exposure, even just doing a bit of research. So why don't you comment on some of the combinations there of the role you're seeking and then a key strength behind that, and that'll just help us kind of see what you're thinking here.
So let's see, we've got role is events sales manager, and the key strengths would be strong communication skills, sales driven, organized, attention to details. And then someone says CPG or global data management solutions. And then client-facing presentations, director, finance or education, business. The skills would be emotional intelligence, influencer, effective communicator. And then let's see, strategic project manager would have critical thinking, analytical, influencer, and then a technical project manager might be communications, organization, collaboration skills. So yeah, I think really matching those up, good examples.
Yeah, that's great. I think those are good examples. Thanks for sharing those. That I think if you think about what you just said and what you matched up in this exercise, and then go back to your resume, go back to your LinkedIn profile, and see if those strengths come through in your documents, in your communication. Also think about how you communicate that in your story. If you are talking about your analytical skills, be ready with some examples of what you've done. So Again, you're not going to be able to put lots of examples in your resume or your LinkedIn profile, but you're going to be able to describe those as you talk with someone and tell them your story. And you may be able to mention a particular project or achievement that you had related to that particular skill. So I can't tell you in how many times that when I was doing recruiting, where I would be talking to a candidate and they would tell me a story about something that was just an excellent example of what they accomplished or what they're capable of doing. And I look back at the resume and there's no mention of it. And there's no way to get that out of what they just told me without asking a few more questions. So you're not going to be able to tell everything on your story, but I think from a um, uh, resume and LinkedIn profile, that's the starting point. And I would say put some effort behind this as far as identifying, again, the roles that you're looking for, and then making sure that you're matching up with what is going to qualify you for those. So a good exercise to think about going forward. On to LinkedIn, and LinkedIn profile. There are some things that LinkedIn is, and there are some things that LinkedIn is not. It is not Facebook, so I would just warn you to make sure that your LinkedIn profile has a very good match to your resume. I say avoid conflicts, and while that sounds very obvious, I can't tell you how many combinations I've seen where people have either put another job on one or the other and left it off the first one, or the description is different, and so you're kind of left with, well, okay, which one's right? And looking at the types of things that you're saying, LinkedIn, is certainly a snapshot of of who you are, what you've done, but it is a very, very popular tool as far as people looking at um, who you are, what you've done. Most people put a picture in. I know there's some sensitivity around, some people believe that putting their picture in may disqualify them from certain things. Frankly, if you're like me and you've got a number of years of experience, um, it's not going to take a very long conversation to find out I'm not 29. So I wouldn't worry. If someone's not looking for a more mature person that has a number of years of experience, then it's not the right fit, for you. So I would include, make sure your summary is good. Again, tie that back to the resume that you have developed, and make sure the picture, if you are going to include a picture, is an appropriate picture. Um, I have seen pictures of people, um, fishing and what looks like something taken out of a bar. There just are some pictures while they're kind of entertaining, they're not advancing your cause as far as, I guess the picture fishing would be important if you were applying for a forest ranger or some type of outdoor
True.
conservation maybe, but for normal activities, I would not do something like that and make it too casual. Not everybody you don't need to be in a suit all the time. Um, it's certainly, there's no one right answer, but just be professional is the way I would look at it. And again, put the keywords, make sure you got your keywords scattered throughout your um, uh, LinkedIn profile, because those are things, as the algorithms do the search on those, they are looking for certain things as far as items in a title or in a particular description of what you've done. And don't forget the same accomplishments from the resume. You know, I think I typically see less detail in the LinkedIn profile as far as what people are uh, uh, saying they've done, how they've done it, what has resulted from that. But you still have an opportunity to identify the things that have really driven some great results for that organization, and use that to communicate to that prospective reader what type of um, employee, team member that you would be. Um, and the last item I have on here is again kind of obvious for those of you who want to put um, a detail of how to reach you. I've seen a little bit of everything, but I want to tell you what not to do also. So some people have certainly their personal email on there. They may have their phone number. That's not necessary, but certainly makes it easier if someone wants to reach out to you. I think the personal email is something that is very helpful because there certainly are um, barriers sometimes to get, and you may not want someone reaching you on your work email asking you about a position. So there certainly are barriers where some work email systems will actually exclude, knowing, coming from the recruiting world, I know that happens, that some recruiting firms are like banned from sending emails into certain organizations. So just make sure you're reachable if you want people to find you. The what not to do is I have had conversations with people and sent them a message through LinkedIn. I reached out to them, and they got back maybe 2 weeks later and said, "Oh, I really want to talk to you. I'm sorry, I don't check that email, or I don't check that path very often." Well, that is a cardinal sin if you want to be reached. And, by virtue of you putting yourself out there, there is at least some agreement, that you are okay with people contacting you. But just make sure that you're checking the sources that you're putting down there, and make sure that you are reachable if someone can try to contact you about a particular position. And so getting towards the end of our session here, where do we go from here? What I want you to do is think about whatever situation your resume is in, your LinkedIn profile is in right now. Some of you, are very advanced in this. I talked to a gentleman yesterday who has been interviewing for several months. He sent out like 150 resumes. He's very, very advanced. I think he had someone help write his resume. He hired a resume writer um, to help him. Not a bad idea if you don't feel like you're communicating your story very well. But I think from a next steps standpoint, what I'd like you to do is think about some of these ideas that we've gone through, and make sure that your resume matches your LinkedIn profile, and that both of those match the story that you're trying to tell. And your story is so important. Go back to the last webinar from last week in this particular series and listen to some of the words around your personal brand. Those tie in very closely to the things that we're trying to get through today. And, use your network. As you build these documents, again, don't be bashful. People want to help you just as much as you want to help them. They like helping you. So use your connections through LinkedIn, through your personal relationships, and through recruiters as they contact you, or maybe people that are connected to recruiters. You can get some good insights there as to what's going on in the market. So, and then finally, the General Electric Credit Union and Xavier Leadership Center series is certainly a tremendous way for you to continue to enhance no matter where you are in your job search process. And the next activity, next session is effective job search activities and networking on September 3rd. So look for that, next week. And with that, Carol, I'm glad to answer questions if you have some.
Sure. So we have time for maybe one, maybe two. What we'll do is I've had several questions, and what we'll do is I'll work with Brent to get answers to those, and we can send them in the follow-up email. And so one question would be, can you talk about the value and types of effective cover letters?
Yeah. So cover letters is another example of something that there are various styles. I've seen some that are very, very brief, and some that if you have a lot of your story to tell, a cover letter is a great way to communicate that maybe you're open to relocation, you're open to new challenges in a different role or whatnot. I would tell you that I don't think there's an awful lot of time spent on cover letters. I think people will scan those, but they really want to see the resume. They want to see the types of things that you've done. The cover letters tend to be a little bit more of a creative writing exercise, and I think from a recruiting standpoint, people want to see a little bit. Well, they want to see the facts of what you've actually done, and that's what's going to come through on the resume. So, use the cover letter to get some attention, particularly if you have a little bit more to your story. I've moved around a number of jobs because I've unfortunately been affected by mergers and some bad luck there. I mean, you can obviously communicate some of that. So those are some comments I would make about the cover letter and how you might use that.
Great. And we'll just answer one more. Do you feel that it's bad to apply for several positions in the same company with the same resume?
So it does confuse, depends on what the company is, I would say, and the background behind that is it depends on how big the company is. It does confuse the HR department or the talent group or whatever it might be. If you're sending those into individual, and many times you don't know this, but if you can find out where it's going, I would communicate more through that cover letter or through additional communications if you can get a message to the person. If it's a blind resume being sent in and you're on a big company website, then I would say that there is, if you're truly interested in multiple positions, then I would probably err towards sending multiple ones in, but it does confuse the process. If you can avoid doing it, I probably wouldn't do it. That's my 2 cents. I know stories of one HR person saying, hey, I got this resume, and another HR person, sitting 2 desks away said, well, I got this resume, and now what do you do? Who got it first, and what do you do? So
yeah. Great point.
It can cause some confusion.
Right. So one more quick question. Someone mentioned contact info shouldn't be at the top of the resume. So do you feel that it should be right at the top, or is there an appropriate place for your contact info?
At the resume, I generally see it at the top of the resume. Depending on your tolerance for, privacy and whatnot, doesn't mean you have to put everything on there. Some people put their address on there, other people do not. But putting your contact info on there to make it easy as to, what your email is or a phone. Generally, I like to see that because it makes it easier for that person to contact you. I will tell you that, just again, back to my recruiting days, recruiters are very sensitive to people's personal situation as far as not wanting their name, address, whatever, spread out to the entire country. And I think, for the most part, I think most recruiters would be sensitive to that, and so that they're not just sharing it, without some care in that. But I would make it as easy as possible for people to contact you. So yes, I would put it at the top of the resume. It just is a good spot for it, to be clear.
Great. Thank you so much, Brent. This has been wonderful. And thank you everyone for joining with us today. The General Electric Credit Union and the Xavier Leadership Center, thank you for joining. And we hope you're walking away with things you can put into place immediately. Following the webinar, you will receive an email with a printable card and a takeaway message and a survey about your experience. We welcome all your feedback to make these webinars even better each week. To sign up for the next webinar or to listen to the recordings, please visit gecreditunion.org or the xavierleadershipcenter.com. Again, I'd like to thank GECU and Brent today for their partnership in providing insights to assist you in your job search. We'll see you on September 3rd with Annette Ballard and effective job search activities and networking. So have a great rest of the week, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, everyone.